Are they killing others, or are they really killing themselves? Welcome everyone to another episode of the Mere Mortals Book Reviews. I'm your host here, Kyron, coming live to you on the 27th of November 2024. We're getting towards the end of the year, and I'm getting excited about this. And as you might surmise, this is the book reviews podcast where I fall in love with a senorita and then throw my life away. No, I don't do that. But I will be talking about a book where a bit of that happens today, which is For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. So this book was published in 1940, about 490 pages in length. It was rather thick, actually, and I'd say it took me about 10 hours of reading to get through as well. Yeah, it was a decently sized book, which his books are normally a little bit smaller than this from what I recall, the ones I have read before. Now, this is a fictional account of an American dynamiter behind the fascist lines of the 1936-37 Spanish Civil War, and he must blow up a bridge and enlist the help of a guerilla group who are behind the lines. So essentially a band of Spanish Republicans who are loyal to the cause, I guess, who are fighting for the cause of the Republicans against the fascists. And so he joins them in the mountains. He kind of makes some preparations with them, falls in love with a girl there, encounters difficulties with not only the leaders of this group and getting them to really help him along in this quest to blow up this bridge, because it has to be done at a certain time during the daytime. It's going to be dangerous, and it's going to result in a fascist backlash against them, so they'll all have to evacuate. And there's just general troubles with the weather and all these sorts of things. So has to make do in a tough situation. The book is told in the style of narration, between mostly just looking at this kind of from a observer over the shoulder sort of deal, but it sometimes goes through internal dialogue of what the characters are thinking, notably Roberto Jordan, the American dynamiter, but it's not told from his point of view, so it's still kind of third person throughout. If I had to try and explain it, it's a little bit of a. It's not a difficult book to read because you do have this constant style of narration, and with Hemingway, it's usually he's very easy reading. However, the techniques of switching between the characters, the different types of dialogues, does make it have a unique style. But I will get into that shortly. So let's jump on to the main themes and questions that this book really arises in oneself or in others. And I suppose the main one for me, it kind of touches on love, because he falls in love with a girl, and also, I guess, war in general, but I really want to focus on the kind of main thing from this book I got was, does killing someone else hurt you in some way? And if so, why? What is it about murder and killing, or taking the life of another human being in particular, where that affects these characters So like a realistic war book, most of the actual book is just the waiting around and prepping. There's not that much action actually happening in the book of people in the moment shooting other people, or running for cover, or being attacked themselves. So you get a lot of prep to the action, and then it's just these tiny little pockets, these bursts that happen. So as we begin this story, we're introduced to Robert Jordan, who's kind of the responsible main character of this book. Old Man Anselmo, who's the guide who's helping, and kind of one of the most reliable of the band who's helping him. We have the cowardly but crafty Pablo, who is the leader of this band, and who is kind of over the war himself, become a bit more unhinged and a bit more dangerous, a bit more sad. We have his wife, who is the commanding Pilar, who she's kind of got a bit of gypsy blood, she's a little bit of magic to her, got some insights, also a very forceful character, kind of rather blunt at times, and will honestly almost domineer her husband. And then we have the preciously beautiful Maria, who Robert falls in love with, a young Spanish girl who's encountered some very hard times during this war. and who he falls in love with, but is largely there as the kind of backdrop for his love story and expressing some emotions and things like that. We won't be talking much about her in this particular book review. So there's a whole host of other characters who are a bit more secondary, and the main purpose, I think, of introducing all of them is we get a glimpse of humanity, I guess, in its kind of just rawest form. Group forms in the hills, and we learn of them. Perhaps we don't like them necessarily. I can't say I really emotionally connected with any of these characters, but certainly we start to appreciate their humanity. Now, as we progress through the book, we see different scenarios evolving, and even recollections of past scenarios of things that had happened during the war. And basically, we see these reactions of these people to murdering other people. Now, sometimes it's enemies, sometimes it's allies, and sometimes it's even friends. So we get a kind of gamut of the relationships, not only of the act of killing, but who it is done to. So almost always there is in the moment, there's kind of either the spectrum of emotion ranges from jubilant to numbness. And so you can be caught up in the in the heat of war, kill someone. You can actually want them dead. You can be happy that they are dead because it means you're not dead. Or you can go about it rather mechanically, like Robert does, where he doesn't feel anything in the time. He'll shoot one of the sentry guards who falls to his knees and dies. And for him, it's like business time. That was just one step in the next step of, blowing up this bridge. What we see afterwards, though, is a coldness at best, I would say, and then severe self-recriminations. So a lot of them will try not to think of the people they have killed. Some of them, like Old Man Anselmo, it weighs heavily on his soul. He's basically trying. He knows it's necessary, but also that it's hurting him. And we see him afterwards, like he'll be crying. He'll be, saying prayers and stuff, very religious, the Spanish. And so we definitely see that, okay, the spectrum goes from, in the initial moment, either good or neutral, afterwards, neutral-ish, neutral bad to very bad. So there's something about the act of killing which is hurting these people. And the only character who doesn't really fit into this category would be Pablo. So he's a great leader, but he's rather selfish. He's willing to kill allies, for example. He'll make and not feel any qualms about this. So in one instance, he enlists another group to help them, but they don't have enough horses to escape. And so he basically, during the actual battle, he kills his own allies. I don't think he'd call them friends, but he kills his allies because he knows that's kind of what's necessary. And then afterwards, he doesn't feel any guilt about it. Like, he's just like, whatever. And also, there's another example where when the war first starts, he is more than happy to torture fascist townfolk, and in doing it in a very deliberate, elongated way. His wife afterwards comes to him and says, like, did you enjoy that? Like, that basically sickened me. There was only one of them who was an actual bad man who she felt some kind of, I guess, joy or even joy is a strong word. Some justness, perhaps, in his death, but many others not. So he likes death, but is scared of it as well. A moment that really stood out for me in this book was what we would call the unjust killing of Don Guillermo. So this is in that same moment. Basically, they take over a town right at the start of the war, which had some fascist leaders, and these fascist leaders, this kind of band, this union, this country club, if you want to call it, they're all corralled into this church, and then they're made to go out one at a time between a flank of townspeople who have these flails, and basically beat them to death and then throw them off the edge of a cliff, or one or the other, it's one of these things. And they get to this point where this guy comes out who, he's kind of fascist in name only. Sure, he went to the country club, and I say country club, he went to the club, he went to the meetings, but for him, he was a good man outside of this. He was liked by the townsfolk, and in just the heat of the moment, they kill him. But this sickens many of the crowd, and in a slightly different turn of events, if there hadn't been such heated emotions, they probably would have let him go. So we see, a simple man with minor faults, he's killed, and this weighs heavily on a lot of people. So why is this? It's just killing a person. It's just atoms in the air. What's the actual reasoning for this? I think the main one is, if you're to look at it on the level of kind of consciousness, you're depriving the world, the universe of consciousness. That's probably a bit too high of a level. I'd go down to something like where the things that make us human in terms of connecting with other people, in fact, what drives Robert Jordan to fall in love with his girl Maria, the shared bonds, perhaps not sexual attraction, but the linking of likes, of shared moments of joy, of feeling close to one another, to having someone who you can rely on, and things like this. All of the things that make soccer clubs really fun, or sports really fun, the enjoying of emotions, the going through the highs and the lows together. A lot of this we see in this band, this group of people who are in the mountains, and they're kind of waiting, they're prepping to go to war. And all of these things, I think it's impossible to kind of just devoid that and only have that on your one group, like this is my group, and then not see it in other people, even though they are of another group. So, for example, there's these big moments where Robert Jordan kills a scout who he comes upon, and afterwards he's going through his letters, and part of this is for reconnaissance. Maybe this guy has information related to the war or things like this. In this case, it turns out he doesn't, and so what he just learned about is, this man had a family back in his area of the Spanish countryside. He had a mother who was worried for him. He had friends who had died. Many had died from the same town or this region where he was in. And obviously this is one where it's just like, okay, well, I can see this was a guy. I had a mother. I had friends from this region. You can put yourself in his shoes very easily. But it also comes down to smaller moments. That's a larger, rather big one. But smaller moments such as seeing a man, just warming his hands over a fire on a very chilly, cool night, and he's a sentry who they're going to kill the next day, or a look of fear before someone dies, or that look of confusion as they've been shot and don't realize what's happening. Even the blood flowing from the veins are all a reminder that this is a real human being, and they are, but for the grace of God, or for the flip of a coin, or the randomness of the universe, that would be me in their situation, dying right now. And because they have seen so many of their comrades die and they just got lucky, they also know the same thing is happening on the other side. So this man has a life, connections. It's simply myself in another form, and I think that's why they form these connections with people. And so taking of that life is a recognition of oneself in a way. The title of this book, For Whom the Bell Tolls, is a reference to a quote which we see in the epigraph, and I'm just going to read this out to you now because it's rather short and meaningful, and I actually want to read this book someday, so wait for that. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the lesser, as well as if a promontory were as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee, by John Donne. That's part of some poetry that he wrote. And I think that section there, the death diminishes me, let me read that out again. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind. I think this is especially pertinent in the case of a civil war. No matter which side won, the average Spanish is going to lose. The average Spaniard would lose, and because they're the ones who are fighting. And so this case in this book, it's especially pertinent because it's a civil war. You can't even have this idea of like, oh, it's the Asian, the Asiatics, or it's the evil Soviets. They boil children and they eat their bones and things like that. It's like, no, okay, we know these people. I've been to that part of the country. I've met these people. I know they're myself. I know they're my fellow countrymen. They just have different views on this one political thing or whatever. And routinely in this book, the characters would reference far off regions which were more of a fascist nature or under their control, or they knew that this person was from there based on their clothing or the way they wore their cap or hat, or it referenced the letters. And they knew the type of people there. So, Spaniards were killing Spaniards, essentially, in this case. So this is especially pertinent where you're like, okay, this is of myself. When I kill this man, I'm killing my country. I'm killing part of me. So the national aspect of this, I think, is not that interesting. It's not that important. But it does add that little extra of being like, okay, this person is myself in some shape or form. So, I mean, this is closely related to another question on morality of killing and war, so I'll have to touch upon it. We see this moral questioning, which is common among soldiers, I believe, and from most of the war books I've read, about the right and necessity of killing. I think most of them, on average, I would say, realize the necessity of just the situation they're in. They have to do it. But the moral righteousness of it is dubious at best. I don't think any real deep philosophy of this is particularly needed in this section. It's simply enough just to say most of the soldiers feel bad for killing someone, therefore it's bad. Like I won't go too far deeper into that here. And we can look to Anselmo here, who is probably the most moral of the characters, the one to aspire to the most out of everyone we see in this book, and he is the one who certainly has the heaviest burden when it comes to killing another. So on a larger scale, war is senseless. The politics, thankfully, in this book is rightly irrelevant. It doesn't matter who was right or wrong in this. Both sides, from what I can tell, had good and bad qualities to them. It's the fascists, okay, but it's the communists on the other side. No person is going to really agree or disagree, and the average Spaniard who is a fascist versus the average Republican who was who was a communist, or the two different sides, if you got them together and they just talked, their politics would, their similarities would override any differences in opinion, is basically what I would got from this. So, and war in general is usually about high up people fucking sending a bunch of, assholes who are sending random countrymen to die for profit or for other reasons. This war in particular was almost a testing ground for the Nazis for their kind of blitzkrieg type tactics, or using their Luftwaffe and trying them out. For the Soviets as well, most of the high command were Soviets, and they were using this as a testing ground once again for battle tactics, war tactics, because there had not been a big war. This was essentially a proxy war for the main World War II, 1939, 1945 war, which was to come. Nasty men, nasty stuff. Not good at all. All right, let's jump into the author, perhaps some extra details. I've covered a couple of books on this channel before. Ernest Hemingway, so we had The Old Man and the Sea, Fiesta, also known as The Sun Also Rises, and A Farewell to Arms. I think those are the only ones I've covered. He lived from 1899 to 1961, so when this civil war was going on, he actually went there as a reporter, so he would have been in his mid-30s, late 30s, about this time. And he covered this war as a journalist. He was a fan of Spain, and he was probably more on the Republican side of things. He writes with the sense of this realistic fiction, so there was actual characters in this book who actually existed in real life, but in a made up scenario because he put words in their mouths they never said and things like this. And the actual characters in this book were based on people that he had met. So realistic fiction. Probably a bunch of himself in this as well, because he has had numerous experiences of intense love with his numerous wives. Once again, I'm not talking about the love section in this book review because I wanted to focus on this aspect of killing. So this is written in a style that I guess conforms to that realistic fiction in the sense of speech and thought. The speech side of things, there's quite a few in the dialogue between them. You see they use this thee, they, thee, thou, thy, thine, and nay, for example. And I think it's a nice touch which lends to the feeling, I guess, of these characters. It's mostly written in English, the dialogue. Every now and then they'll have a, que va, or other guerrillos, and he'll algo raro, and he'll have this italicized so that you can see that it is a Spanish word, a phrase that's here. Thankfully for me, I know how to read Spanish. I'm pretty good with that, so I know what is being said here. But then afterwards he'll say, murió, Robert Jordan said into the deaf man's ear. He is dead, which murió means he died. So you get that, and then this little explanation afterwards. You could say this is redundant. I actually think it adds nicely to the whole feel of this book. It's in a different country. It's dealing with people of different, different languages and stuff like this. The Spanish language is very different than English. So I really liked it. And this thee, thy, thine kind of adds, once again, to this John Doone, for whom the bell tolls. It adds that, archaicness to it, which I think lends to this kind of nobility that the Spanish seem to have about themselves, to this feeling of heritage and old country, but then mixed with the newness of war. There's just something about it. I really liked it. As well as the internal dialogues, I think works really well. Captures the kind of schizophrenic nature of the human mind. Robert Jordan, for example, questioning his love for Maria, questioning himself, questioning if this is right to do or not. Once again, this is the kind of iceberg theory, which I've talked about before. Description of the hills and surroundings of writing in this style that's rather plain, but with this deeper and hidden meanings kind of beneath the surface. It's quite enjoyable. I do like Hemingway's style of writing, if not necessarily always what he is writing about or how he's writing. So let's jump into the final summary here. I started off really excited with this book because the story of the bridge was just cool. It was really simple, like man going behind enemy lines. He's got dynamite. It's a different type of war, I guess, and not just like an absolute bloodbath. I connected with the story immediately. It was like, oh, this is going to be a good one. Unfortunately, it lost a bit of its early initial pace. To be expected, the book can't all be about action. To realistically portray war, you probably need to show just how much of it is planning and sitting around doing nothing and being bored. So I get that. Unfortunately, that's not the bit that I didn't enjoy. It was the rather tiresome and long dialogues between Robert and Maria, mostly. And it's not that I didn't enjoy the love portion of the book. It added something to do during these boredom sections, so that was nice. It was more that when they spoke together, it didn't seem to really add anything for me. So this book, 490 pages. If it was 390, I think I would have really, really enjoyed it a lot more. The dialogue between them was almost comical at times at just how irrelevant it felt it was. So I felt it worked better when it had the plot and was moving forward. So yeah, on the plus side, it didn't make me sad like many other war books do. So that's a positive, because reading war books sucks at times. I think it's necessary, but go read All Quiet on the Western Front, something like that. It's not particularly fun or pleasant reading. So I think this didn't have as much of the just absolute carnage and waste of life. It was still a lot of waste of life, but just not as much as you'll find in some of these other books. Perhaps because of the Spanish Passion, they talk about the glory of the bullfighting and things like this, the danger. He puts this spin on it of the recklessness and the chance, which and equates that to war, which I probably wouldn't agree with necessarily. I'm sure there's some people, someone like Ernst Junger with Storm of Steel, he described a lot of war in this kind of fashion as well, or albeit via a kind of German passion, not a Spanish passion. Those are two completely different things. Yet it didn't make me sad, so that was good. So overall, I'm going to give this book a solid 6 out of 10 for Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. Recommendations of other books, it's kind of like a compilation of the 3 others I listed above. So this being Fiesta is probably the most similar in terms of the Spanish writing and style. They reflect on the bullfighting a lot. Obviously, A Farewell to Arms has the war aspect, and then The Old Man and the Sea. Well, there's an old man in this one. It's not that similar to The Old Man and the Sea. What else would I recommend? If you want to know more about the Spanish Civil War, I have read an extensive book called The Battle for Spain, The Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939 by Anthony Beevor. This gives excruciating detail on the movements of troops, of really what was happening with why I was able to talk about the testing ground of the Nazis using the Luftwaffe. I found that it's a long book. That's a thick one. Probably a bit too heavy on the details of actual movements. But if you want to know about the Spanish Civil War, I can recommend that one highly. And Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell gives a sense of the battle in the front lines. And his deals a lot more with the politics that you'll find within this particular war, of the communists, of Palm, of why the Palm got, the anarchists. It's very complex, the Foreign Legion fighters and things like that. So Homage to Catalonia, George Orwell, one of his better books as well. And maybe even Don Quixote, if you want the speech style and the Spanish writing. So little random one there. Let's jump into the end section here. There's a Value for Value podcast. I do all of this free, available for you anytime, anywhere, anyhow that you want. There's never going to be ads nor sponsorships on this podcast. And so I provide all this value up front to you. I just ask that you can provide some back to me. You can do this in many ways: time, talent, and treasure. Sharing this with someone who you think would enjoy. Just spreading a bit of word about this. Clicking the social links, likes, comments, hitting the bell notifications, all those sorts of things. I also would really appreciate any book reviews and comments that you have for me. I actually have a couple that I can read out right now from some people. So we have Neo Skeptic. He's saying, bruh, you're too predictable. I can kind of guess which books you will dislike, which happen to be most of which you read. And this was in reference to my last book review on The Calendar of Wisdom by Leo Tolstoy. I have stats which say this is not the case. About 80% of the books that I read, I rate 5 and above. So, and in that case, I think 5 and above is a recommendation, even though most of the bell curve centers around the kind of 7 out of 10. That's kind of almost my baseline. And then we also had Carlos A.M., and we had a little back and forth there. And then Carlos A.M., he said, Tolstoy was a man with struggles and doubts. It makes sense if he wrote this book for himself. I think I have the same book, but in Spanish. It's called Aforismos. It's a collection of quotes, but they're not ordered by the calendar. Very interesting that how books will change with the Spanish translations or different translations across different languages, how they alter things just seemingly randomly, but as I said, languages are very different. I'm going to give this a shot soon because I do have 2 books here: The Alchemist and O Alquimista, both by Paulo Coelho, and we've covered the this one, The Alchemist, on the channel multiple times. I've got two, like a book review and then extra learnings, I think, from it. This one, when I do read it in this next month, is going to be more about, and I'm reading this in the original Portuguese, will be more about the differences that I've noticed across the two books. So check out for that one in the coming month, which gets us onto our final section here. I do this live 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on a Wednesday. It's going to be pretty consistent with that for the foreseeable 6 months, I think. And I really do appreciate when you come in, join me. Johnny came in again today, said, "Hi, Karen, I'm at work right now. My days off got switched this week due to the holiday. I'll watch this when I get home. Bummer. Just wanted to pop in and say hi, and I'll be back next week." Thank you, Johnny. Much appreciated, my friend. Always fun having someone joining in on the chat. And yeah, what's coming up in the future? So. I will finish this Machado de Assis book at some point. Memorias Póstumas de Bras Cubas. I will do that. I'm currently reading two at the moment. One is I kept saying this the wrong way around. The Square and the Tower by Neil Ferguson. And I have started Devil Take the Hindmost by Edward Chancellor, History of Financial Speculation. I'm really enjoying that one. It's very interesting, considering the crypto times that we live in. So that's it for today. Thank you everyone for joining in. Really hope you enjoyed this episode. I will be back next week as usual. And until the next time, Trevor Bell also just popping in. Hola, he says right at the end. Unfortunately, I'm ending it up here, Trevor. So jump in next week around this time, and very much appreciated everyone. Ciao for now. Karen out. Bye.